Hi everyone, welcome to the second part of my basic FHIR tutorial series. It's still in the module 1 overview and FHIR resources. This tutorial series is created for the master program in data science for healthcare and health informatics at Ramatibadi Hospital, a medical school in Bangkok, Thailand. My name is Ratpanjawat. I'm a GP doctor. Currently, I work at Thai Health Information Standard Development Center, and this is my background and this is my contact channel. So after the last session, we talked about why we need FHIR. For this session, we will dig deeper into FHIR specification. When you go to the FHIR specification website, okay, let's say that you start with Google and you search channel 7 FHIR, and it will bring you here. This is the homepage of the specification, and this is the version. It's a release 4. That is the current version for now. When you go to the specification, you will see many things and it will be a little bit overwhelmed, but I would say we can divide the specification into these 4 groups. The first one is content model. It specify how should we structure our data. The second one is exchange mechanism. Let's say that we know how to structure our data, and then what's next is how we should exchange the data that we already structure. And the third one is extension framework. It talk about, okay, we have our structured data. How should we custom FHIR to meet our needs? And there are some other stuff like guideline for some other things, explain how we should do that and why we should do that, something like that. Okay, so let's start with the first thing, that is FHIR content model. We should start with resource. Resource is the smallest unit of exchange. Okay, maybe there are some elements inside the resource, but you cannot exchange the element directly. You have to put it inside the resource before you can exchange the information. So resource is the smallest unit of exchange in FHIR. Maybe you can think of resource like a class in an object-oriented programming, or a table in a relational database, or a sheet in spreadsheet. At present, there are around 150 resources. Each resource represents a different healthcare data domain, but there will be no multiple resources that serve the same purpose. For example, we use the patient resource to represent the patient data. We use practitioner resource for the doctor data, organization for hospital, condition for diagnosis, observation for lab result, and etc. But there will be no other resource that represent the patient data. Okay, there may be some resource that look quite similar, like a resource in the medication category, medication request admin dispense, but those resources will serve different purpose. There will be no resource that used for the same things. And the number of the resource 150 seem to be so many resources, but this happened because FHIR was designed to cover as many situations in healthcare as much as possible. So that's why there are so many resources. But when we look into these resources, we will find that for our specific context, there are not so many resources that we will frequently use it. And like in this diagram, each resource contains elements inside that resource. Now we look at the FHIR element. FHIR element is the smallest unit of data. FHIR resource is smallest unit of exchange. Element, the smallest unit of data. Each element will have a data type to specify the type of that element. Here are some example data type. We can group it into mainly two groups. The primitive data type and the complex data type. The primitive data type is the data type that had only one value, like this: string, integer, URI. String is the string of character, right? Integer is the number, for example. URI is a string with specific pattern. But complex data type is a group of primitive data type. For example, quantity data type. To tell quantity of something, we have to have two value, right? At least. The one is the value, the number of the quantity, and the second is the unit. For example, 5 milligram. 5 is the value and milligram is the unit. So this is an example of quantity data type. For human name, data type human name, we have to have first name, last name, and maybe suffix, prefix, for example. And don't need to worry about this for now, but here is the data type. Again, element is the smallest unit of data, and each element has data type. Many elements combine inside resource. Okay, there are some elements inside a resource that FHIR specify that we have to choose a value from a particular terminology. This is terminology binding for that resource. For example, administrative gender of a patient, we have to choose a value from male, female, other, unknown. To conform with FHIR, we cannot choose another word. We have to choose between these because the terminology was bind to this element. But in the actual implementation, we can configure the element to bind to a terminology we want, that is profiling, which is another topic. And that is the first group of the FHIR specification. The next group is exchange mechanism. After we structure the data to conform to a resource that we interest, and we create JSON or XML, we can send these JSON or XML to other people via the REST API. Have a minor asterisk here to tell you that actually we can use other mechanism, but REST is the main mechanism. It's like in this picture. The sender wants to send a resource instance to the receiver via the REST API, like this. In the real implementation, we typically send a lot of resource in one transaction. For example, if we just want to send a data about the OPD visit, very simple OPD visit, we have to send the patient resource, practitioner resource again for the nurse, this one for the doctor, and organization resource for information of the hospital. If we want to send the drug allergy or food allergy, we need to send this allergy intolerant resource. We want the encounter resource for the visit, observation for the lab, condition for the diagnosis, and go on and go on. So just simple OPD visit, we need 12 resources for that. And here is the REST API in FHIR. I will not go in detail in this session. There is a dedicated section for this thing. So what I want to say now is that FHIR REST API is the same as REST API of other web application. And here is the example. Suppose we have a FHIR server with the URL as this one, rad.com. We stored our patient data in the patient resource at the ID 1234. If we want to retrieve the data, we can make a GET request like this: get the base URL, the type, and the ID, and then we get the patient resource in the server. So let's go back to this slide a little bit. First, we talk about content model, then we talk about exchange mechanism. The last part is extension framework. In case of FHIR core specification doesn't meet our need, and FHIR has the extension framework to help us about that. Because as I mentioned in the last session, that FHIR resources mainly designed for general purpose use following the 80-20 rule. When we implement, we must customize it to meet our context. This process is profiling. What do I mean when I say customize it? For example, the FHIR core resource has this resource and has 12 elements inside. Maybe there are some elements that we don't like. It's like it doesn't solve our exchange problem. There are some elements like this, the pink one doesn't solve our problem, so we want to change it. Or there will be some element that we want to add into our resource. This is profiling. Let's say that we want to profiling the patient resource. In FHIR core specification, the patient resource have the identifier elements and has other elements and has a lot of other elements. But we want to focus on identifier element. In FHIR core, we can use any identifier system. And FHIR even doesn't mandate that we have to have this element. We can remove it and say that our resource comply to FHIR. When we want to use FHIR in our context, maybe we want to create a Thai patient profile and we want to configure the identifier element and we want to add the religion element. We want the identifier to be a Thai national ID as an identifier, and we want it to be a required element, so we can make it like that. And we want the religion's information, which is not in a FHIR core, and we want it to be a value from a specific set of value. This is profiling, and this is how we do it in the FHIR term, and you don't have to worry about it now. And for a particular exchange context, normally we will have to create a lot of profiles and a lot of extensions and a lot of terminology and maybe other rules. When we pack all of this, we can call it FHIR artifacts into a single packet for a particular context. That is implementation guide. And there are several famous implementation guides in the world, and I would say most of the pretty developed country has its own implementation guides. For example, in the US, they have the US core implementation. It's like a artifact for exchanging the general patient information in the US. And UK, Australia, the Netherlands, Germany, other countries like this, they all have their own FHIR implementation guide. The next one that I want to mention is International Patient Summary or IPS implementation guide. It's artifacts for exchanging the patient summary between countries. Let's say that I am in Thailand and I want to travel to Sweden, for example, and I got sick there. So doctor there can access my patient information in Thailand if both parties agree to this IPS IG. And for now, I will give you a FHIR specification tour to give you the overview of the specification and how they structure things. Okay, so this is the home page of the FHIR specification, and in the top menu is the main navigation, and now we are in the home page. And what you will see here is that if you are first time here, you read all of this. It's like a summary for executive or developer or clinician things. And in the next part, this is the FHIR module. FHIR specification divided the specification into 13 module. There are 5 level. I will go through this in the next session. And for each level, there will be some module. Some level have one module. Some level has many modules. And each level serve different purpose. This one is getting start. The getting start for some people that want to read the introduction things. This one is like a page with quick link to some important page in the specification. When you want to look for something quickly, maybe you can visit this page. And the next one, I think this one is the page that I visit the most. This page lists all the resources in FHIR, and there are several ways to sort it. You can sort it by group, or sometimes it's difficult to find the specific resource, but you remember the name. You can go here and okay, patient resource. You can the letter P is here, so this patient resource. And when you come to this page and you see a box like this, you will feel like, oh, it's quite similar to a box here, but actually it's completely different boxes. This one is FHIR module. This one is the way they categorize resources. This one is based on architecture things. Here in architecture overview, you go here. This is the way they categorize the resource. But in the module, there will be a resource and thing that is not a resource in each module. Okay, like the security and privacy module, this is a resource, but there are other things that is not a resource. Maybe just an information, or maybe a guide or something like that. Okay, so this is the overview of the navigation. Now we will focus on each resource and how to read it. Let's say that we know that we want to use the patient resource. Okay, and we see here, patient resource. Oh, I forget. One thing I want to mention is the number and the N letter here. This one is the majority of that resource. One thing that you should remember is that the N is the maximum. It's normative content, which means that it's pretty mature. And in the next version, let's say FHIR R5, the resource that is already N will still working in the next version. But if you see a number like this, 0, I would say most of them will be a trial use, or this one, it's just to be in the specification for people to try it and feedback. So in the next version of FHIR, there are a chance that the content of it will be different from the current version. So if you have to choose the resource to use, I think it's good idea to focus on the resource that is pretty mature. But if it's a project that need to use the immature resource, then you have to take the risk that it may change in the future. When we get into the resource, there will be a navigation inside that as well. the tab that is most important is the first 3 tab: content, example, and detailed description. In the contents, there will be several sections. I would say the important one is the one on the top here. Is the description. What is this resource for? The scope of usage, and some other resource like encounter. There will be another section. There will be other section like a status of that resource and boundary and relationship. And for some resource like medication request, like I said, that this resource has some resource that it look pretty similar, but this section will tell you what is different in each of these resource. Okay, so now go back to patient resource. The most important information is this one. It's the content of the resource. Like I said in the beginning, that each resource have an element. This is the resource, and these are the element inside that resource. And for each element, it will have a data type. If it begin with a small letter, I forget what it called, the small letter. It will be a primitive data type. You can open it and view it. Primitive data type will be only single value. Boolean is yes or no, date is date. Like this, Boolean is true or false, integer is number, string is character. Date is date, date is date, like this. Time is time. No other value group into the same data. If it begin with a capital letter like this, human name, it means that that element is a complex data type. If it's a complex data type, means that it's composed of several primitive data types, or even the complex data type within the complex data type. Like a human name, there are family name, given name. A period that the name is valid is another complex data type. You go here, the period data type have start and end date time. So this is the name, the data type, and this is the description. If you're not sure what is this, the gender, you can hover the mouse here. It will show some description. But if you click here, it will bring you to the detail tab here, and it will have more information that you can understand, that can help you understand that element. And so we have the resource, the data type, and next is flags. Flag is the information about that element that important for us, for the implementer to know. The important one is this thing, the is modifier. If that element has this flag, is modifier flag, it means that that element can significantly change the meaning of that resource. I think this one is quite, I think for patient resource, this one is quite obvious. Disease is the element for indicate that if the individual is diseased or not. Because if the patient is diseased, that change the meaning of that patient significantly, right? So its modifier is that it's a flag for that situation. And this one is summary. I don't think it's so much important. Another flag that is important is constraint, like this. When there is a I letter here in that, it means that that element have some rule that related to other element, and if it has I here, there will be some explanation in the below of that content here in constraint. Patient contact. Maybe you read this, you don't understand anyway what does it mean, but expression is a language in FHIR for define this stuff. Maybe it's more difficult to understand, but basically it said that in the patient contact element, at least it have to have the name, the telecom, the address, or organization. One of these at least. So you will see that it's a rule in this element, but it's related to other element. Another thing that important is cardinality. Cardinality is the minimum and maximum number of that element. If it's on the left side, it's minimum number. On the right side is maximum number. If it's 0, then it means that that element is not required. We can remove it if we want. And if it's 1, it means that that is a required element. On the right side is the maximum number of that element. Let's say that gender, we can have only one gender, right, in the administrative sense. So it must be 0 to 1. We cannot have multiple gender, or we cannot have multiple birthday. But for something like name, we can have multiple name for multiple occasions, or we can have multiple telecom, we can have multiple phone number, we can have multiple emails. That is. One thing that I want to tell you is that in FHIR, they rarely require any elements. Most of the time you will see 0 in the left side. It's up to the implementer to do it in the profiling. Although most of the time is 0. The minimum cardinality is 0. But there are some element like encounter, this one, that they require the element. Like they require that every encounter must have a status, for example. So this is the cardinality. I will show you this one, US core. This is a profile. In the FHIR core, they don't require any element. But when people created a profile, you will see that they require a lot of elements. And you will see this S symbol when you look into some profile. And you will not see any S in FHIR core. S symbol means that that element must be support. If the implementer claim that their implement conform to this profile, they must support this element with the S symbol. What is support? It's totally up to the people who define that implementation guide to specify what is support for them. But people who implement that implementation guide have to support, like they say. And we back here to the resource again. The last one that I want, not the last, the next one that I want to mention is this thing. It's terminology binding. It means that for this element, it bind with this value set. When you go here, you will see this is the value set here. Don't have to worry about it yet. What you have to remember is that when they are bind to some value set, you have to choose the value from the value set that they give you. And there will be a summary in the below here that which element bind to which value set and which how much strength they are. So this is the content of the resource. Oh, and this one, when you see an element that have an X inside, an X after the name, it means that when you implement this element, you have to choose between these two data types. You have to choose between Boolean or date time. Let's say for this element, you can choose if the patient was already dead or not, yes or no, Boolean, or you can fill in the number in case of oh, he died at that time, for example. And for this one, it means that this element reference to other element. I will tell you more about this in the next session. And we have scope and usage. We have resource content and terminology binding constraint. And this one is pretty depends on each resource. This patient resource had a lot of content in the below thing, but for example, other resource like maybe encounter like this, they don't have much information in the below. They only have terminology and what is they have a terminology. Oh, they don't even have constraint. Interesting. Example you said. So in the lower section of the resource is pretty different in between each resource, but at the end there will be the section that pretty similar in many resource, that is search parameter. That is when you searching for information related to that particular resource, how do you formulate the search query? So this one is depend on element in that resource and it's different for each resource. Okay, and another thing is this example. When you look at the resource, okay, you may understand, but a real world example will help you understand more. Like the general person resource, and you click JSON to view it as a JSON format. You can see here, and you can view raw JSON here. So identifier is corresponding with identifier things. So that is the overview of each resource. So in summary, things that we should pay attention in any resource, there are around this one, 5 or 6 things. The first one is maturity. If it's an N normative resource, its content will be pretty stable in the next version of FHIR. If it's other number, that may be changed in the next version. Oh, I forget to tell you about this. Sometimes the resource became N, but inside the resource, there might be some elements that they are TU, trial use inside it. Let's see this one, bundle is N, right? It's normative resource maturity. But below here, you will see a TU element inside. It means that in the next version, this element might change, but other element will not change. Okay, and the next one is flags. The most important one is modifier because it can change the meaning of that resource. The second important is constraint, which is rule between element that sometimes we have to concern about it. And the third one is cardinality, the minimum and maximum number of that element. And the data type is also important because it defines what data we have to put inside that element. And value set binding to determine which data in the coded data that we can use. And for some element, there might be option for data type, the one with the X in the end. And some element might refer to other element or other resource, the one with the reference, the one with the reference thing. reference data type. Yeah. So that is for overview of the FHIR specification. I hope that you enjoy the tour. If you have any question, feel free to comment in the video or ask me when we meet. And thank you very much for attending. See you again next time. Bye bye.